Welcome to Specific Love. This is the third edition of our deck building series. In the first video, we did the foundation and the frame of the deck. In the second one, we did some of the posts, we got the decking on, and we got the stairs started. In this video, we're gonna be adding the railing and doing up all the other finishing touches. Let's begin. Now, since the last video, we put the rest of the decking on the stairs. Real simple, just adding screws. Now, if you notice, I have fencing around our stairs, and that's because we have a dog in our backyard, and he's not that bright sometimes. And I have a feeling that if he goes up on this deck before we get the railing on, there's a good chance he might jump off and hurt himself. So that's why we have this here. Now, just a reminder, as we're installing the post, we're using 2 bolts that go all the way through each of the boards into the frame so it's nice and secure. And then on the inside of the frame, we're using one of these brackets to make sure everything is solid. You don't have to worry about this moving at all. In many cases, you'll probably have to trim the decking to get the post up. In my case, I only had to trim this one board, but I've trimmed it flush so I can get this post right here on, and then we're gonna continue building the rest of them on. Now, once we get all the posts on, it's time to start installing the railing, but we don't wanna use just standard wood railing. We would like it to be a little more open and easy to see through. So we're gonna be using cable wiring. Now, many of the kits that you can buy for this are quite expensive, but I was able to piece together a nice little setup for our deck that is relatively inexpensive. Now, I'll list all the pieces down in the description, so make sure you check those out just in case you're interested yourself. Now, when you're adding your cable railing, there's always a chance that you might over tighten them just a little bit, and they're warping the wood or bending it in a little too much. Also, since wood can warp naturally, especially these posts, we wanted to add a little additional supports at a lower section here and just under the handrails, just to give this some added strength and support themselves. Now, when I added these supports down here, this is actually really simple. You just get the exact measurement in between the 2 posts, cut out the wood, and you want it to be a snug fit. You don't want to be too tight, but you definitely don't want it to be loose. And then I just added a couple screws on each end to hold it in place. Here's a little tip when you're adding your supports here. Just grab a couple cutoffs from your 4x4s. We're gonna take those and use those as spacers. You put one under each side, you place your wood on top, get it centered up, and add the screws. And you can do this all the way around and make it really quick and easy to install them. Now that I have the bottom supports in place, I think it looks a little bit empty right here in the corner. I don't have to do anything here, but I decided I'd create a little corner piece I'm gonna put right there to make those look a little more continuous. Now, once I get the top rails on, I can honestly say this is starting to look like a complete deck, and I'm really, really excited at this point. I still got a ways to go, but yeah, it's getting there. Now, to get the rail set up for your stairs, you gotta make sure you get the exact angle. In my case, I knew it was 35 degrees of a slant going down. So I've already cut it down here at the bottom. Now, to get the right length, all you gotta do is line everything up, draw a line where it meets your top rail, and then cut it at that angle as well. Then you should be able to slide it in place and screw it in place. Now that I have all the wood supports in place, it's time to start adding the cable wiring. But I can't just start drilling and adding wiring because it could be all out of shape and misaligned. So I needed to create a template. Now, this is the same plywood that I created the stringer template from. It's just some leftover scrap. You don't have to use this, use whatever you want. Now, when it comes to adding the spacing in between each wire, there is some regulations to the code. So make sure you check your code to find out exactly what is required in your area. Now, in my area, you can't let a 4-inch ball go between any of the rails. So a lot of people will place them at 3.5 inches. But because I'm using cable railing, it is strongly recommended to do it at 3 inches. I have a hole here, and they're 3 inches apart, and so forth. And the reason why is that cable gives a little bit. So you don't want to have that little give and then be able to get that 4-inch ball through and it not pass code. So make sure you create some kind of template so you can easily get everything nice and aligned. Now, let me show you what I'm using to actually anchor the cables in. These are just little anchor screws with a little hollow tube. And once you get the cable inside, you crimp the cable inside. You don't have to worry about it coming out. Now, the kit I bought has a left hand and a right hand turning screws so that as you're screwing this in this direction, the opposite screw goes in the same direction like so. So that way you don't have to worry about the wire or cable getting all twisted up. And once everything is in place, it should be nice and secure. Now, all the components I'm using, including the cable and all the hardware, are all stainless steel, so these should last a very long time. Now, drilling the holes for the screws on the end posts is pretty straightforward. But drilling the holes on the center post where the wire goes all the way through can be a little bit more tricky. And to do that, we're gonna be still using the same template, except I did a little mark on the side of the template here, a little dash, and then we're gonna use a speed square to line everything up, draw a light line all the way across the post so we know where it's gonna intersect on this side, line up the mark on this side, and then we can drill both sides, hopefully meeting in the middle by just lining everything up with the marks. And then once I have the holes in both sides, I found if you take a little dowel rod, you kind of push all of the material that's loose out of the holes, it's a lot easier to get everything through. Then on both sides of the through holes, we're gonna add these little inserts, and it'll make that drill hole look a lot fancier and just a lot cleaner. And here's what the lag screws look like when they're in place and crimped and everything's nice and tight. Now if you notice on this one and a little bit on this one here, we have a couple threads showing, and that'll allow us to tighten it in the future if these ever become a little bit loose. And here's what the little pieces look like on the through holes. I think it makes it look really fancy. Now we've completed one side of the deck here, and these cable wirings really make everything look so open. I figured I'd show you what it looks like at night with the lights on it because it's a little bit easier to see. We've had a supervisor this whole afternoon watching us do this. Now when we're adding the wires to the stairs, we got to take into consideration the angle in which they need to slant. Otherwise, it's just gonna look really weird for them trying to come straight out and then angle down. So for that, I'm using a guide block that is set to 35 degrees, and I'm putting it in place, clamping it down, and then drilling the hole with it. That way I know all these are not only spaced out correctly, they're at the correct angle. Might be just a little bit hard to see, but there is the finished product. With the wire railing, we really think it stands out and makes the view just awesome. So we can see right through and exactly what is on the other side of the deck. From the yard. Now you'll notice we still have this fencing at the bottom of the stairs. Eventually I'm actually going to build a fence that will pivot off of one of these posts, but for now we're just gonna live with this. And next up, we're gonna be adding a top rail to really set this off and give a lot more space to put drinks on and anything else you would like to put on top of your rails. But first, I wanna thank our friends over at PIC who knew we were building a deck and sent out a bunch of bug killers and solar lights and things that'll work great for our setup. So thank you, PIC, I really do appreciate it. We're gonna put this to good use. Now watch these lights when I turn off the light. Oh, that is cool. Check that out. Now for the top of your railing, you can use a variety of materials. In fact, I was just gonna use some of my decking that I had left over. But I talked to a local contractor and he suggests to actually use a 2x material. This is a 2x6. It's the same width as the decking material, but it's a 1/2 inch thicker. And he said because of that, it should last longer in the weather and less likely to warp. So that's what I'm gonna use. Now my deck is 12 foot by 16 feet. So in other words, if I wanted to run a full solid rail across the top here, I wouldn't be able to go with 12 foot. I'd actually have to go at 16. And on a 16-inch length, I would actually have to go probably like a 20-foot long board. And that is, well, a lot of waste, a lot of extra money, and I don't want to go that route. So instead, I'm gonna join together 2 smaller boards. Let me show you how. In case you're wondering why I need a longer board, my top rail actually extends further out than the 12 foot and the 16, so that's why I need that extra length. Now to join the boards together, I'm actually doing it with a 45-degree angle. That way I can put screws in both boards coming in from each direction, and that way it'll have strength holding them together, and this way it is less likely for them to separate because they'll already be sandwiched together. And if by chance it does, you can always take a little bit of sandpaper, go over the edge, and that should smooth it out. And then in each of the corners, we're just gonna do some miter cuts at about 45 degrees so we can put these together, and it should be nice and smooth after we get some screws in. And this is kind of an exciting moment. The handrail is in place and the deck is basically done. Now if you're thinking about doing cable railing, this is an awesome setup once it is complete. It's a lot of work. Don't get me wrong, it took us several days to get all this wiring into place, but it is definitely worth it after seeing the finished product. If you're wanting to have an open view for your deck so you can see beyond just the wood, this is a great option for you. It allows us to see out into the yard in case we have kids playing or we just want to relax and enjoy nature. Anyway, this is a great option. I highly recommend it. You want this? Hey, you want this? Huh? This is awesome. Okay, some final thoughts on not only the deck railing, but just building the deck in general. Now, building a deck, it is a lot of work and took a lot longer than I was planning on it to just take in general. So if you plan on building a deck, probably gonna take longer than you're planning, because don't forget, weather's unexpected. It might rain, it might be too hot, it could be a lot of just unpredictable things, and it just takes longer. Also, there's a very good chance, especially in my case, I had to run back to the store quite a few times because I didn't have enough hardware or enough screws or definitely not enough wood, and had to make a few trips on that. So just take that into consideration if you're gonna build a deck. Now when it comes to the cable railing, again, it's a lot of work, but the finished product looks awesome and we're just super happy with how the deck has turned out. Now I hope you enjoyed this build process. If you hadn't seen the other two videos, I'll put a link to those in the description, so make sure you check those out. Otherwise, get out in your shop and have fun building. Neighbors are playing. Fires to the Stair. I shouldn't say easily.
Sorry, I was fine.
We're gonna support. All right, so yeah. The materials. Oops.